Welcome to the Mapped In Speaker Series.
So I'm currently speaking with Aaron Butcher, who is the head of digital and technology at QIC. He's worked for QIC for over 5 years now and has led the charge on a number of their digital initiatives. So it's a pleasure to have him here today. Everyone, please welcome him to the podcast. So, hey Aaron, thanks very much for joining the Mapped In Speaker Series.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. How's it in Australia right now?
It's pretty good at the moment. We're still in the tail end of summer, which is nice, but it's a good time of year. How's it up there?
No, that's fantastic. Yes, no, I think this is what I always love talking with customers who live on the other side of the world is that, they're definitely experiencing the different season of the year, and I can sort of empathize about how difficult it is in a Canadian winter compared to an Australian summer.
Yeah, I can empathize with you, and hopefully you're jealous of so.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you very much for taking the time today. I think one of the big reasons that we really wanted to bring you to the table here today is to talk about data. I wanted to really understand, there is a lot of talk about data these days as it relates to real estate. And I think one of the biggest topics is how much data there is. So I was wondering on your end, what is the kind of data that you always go back to?
Yeah, I guess there's multiple ways to answer that. And within the business, there's different pockets of data. So depending on, I guess, where you work in the business, your daily use of data is different. In the space that I'm in and being very close to the customer, we, obviously are looking at things like, social media metrics, how websites are performing, looking at, EDM open rates, those sort of engagement metrics, but then also what's happening in the shopping centers. So, how many people are entering the building and where they're walking around in the common spaces, and sort of understanding those behavioral metrics as well and traffic flows. If you talk to our head of research, he'd be looking at his trade area analysis data, which we get from second-party data from a research company. So he's constantly getting those numbers, revising those numbers to sort of understand the catchment area and its affluence, and giving that back to our sales team so they can go out and sell on a daily basis. If you're talking to the sales team, they'd be looking at some of the stuff I look at. So definitely the in-store behavioral metrics, but then, looking at the sales figures and sort of how a retailer is performing so they can have those conversations, both with new potential tenants as well as, existing tenants and how they're performing. The investment management team, if you went to them, they're very financial based. So they're looking at the P&Ls of each individual asset, how they're performing, what the leasing team are doing, what the traffic flows are, and sending that back to our funds team so then we can work on valuations that go back to our investors. So if you kind of look across the whole landscape of the business, data becomes a pretty important thing for every area of what we're doing.
Right. And I'm curious, on the sales/leasing front, how much more important these days is data becoming compared to, 5 years ago when you started at QIC?
Yeah, look, I think, for every real property business, every real estate business, sales and traffic are sort of those two metrics that sort of hinge the entire business. So those have always historically been the most important metrics in the business. We're finding, retailers and even our investors are asking for more and more behavior information. So not only are they wanting to know how many people walk through the door and how much they're spending, they're sort of where are they going in the centers, what's being utilized the most. From a retailer perspective, they want to know how many people are walking past their stores. And if people are walking past and they're not converting to sales, is sort of starting to draw those correlations as well for them. So yeah, I think the metrics for real estate are changing. If you also add in the online sales, for us is sort of something we'd love to understand, but we can't really find out from retailers. It's sort of a black box for us at the moment. It's something that we need to start factoring into understanding the performance of our assets, and then also how the trade area and the catchment are actually shopping, because that helps us optimize the assets. If retail is not doing so well? Could we add more food? And that all comes from those sort of, data sources we collect ourselves, but also what are given to us by our customers.
No, absolutely. And I wonder, one of the things that is really a large trend that we see in the real estate world right now, especially in retail, is digital natives. So obviously everyone is trying to attract those digital natives, and getting them into a physical environment is usually, quite a big risk for them. When you think about data and, again, what's out there, what is available, who are these new companies coming out, all those different pieces, how much are you looking to essentially replicate what's already online? How are you thinking about what kind of data to implement and which ones work well for the business as it relates to what's already available online?
For me, the industry has sort of started to chase this holy grail of what Amazon has built. So being very highly, digitally innovative, and then having like a business services or a managed service sort of proposition. And you see a lot of real estate companies, sort of getting out of being what traditionally we always were. We always were a platform business like Amazon in a physical space, but really, a provider of infrastructure. So you have an infrastructure that works, that someone can come in, plug into, and trade off. And the evolution seems to be moving out of infrastructure and not forgetting about the infrastructure, but moving out of infrastructure and sort of becoming more of a managed services business where, we're collecting data, we're providing data, and we're really becoming part of how a retailer operates, and helping them to sort of sell products and services. And, there's sort of an argument that, yeah, I think we sort of need to move into that space. We all need to be a bit more digitally innovative, but, becoming the next Amazon, or chasing Amazon is just not something we're going to win at, because the capital constraints and the investment to do it will always be outbid by the Amazons of the world, right? And there's a lot of property business, I think, who have learned that lesson. Yeah, I mean, the digital native thing, I mean, in Australia especially, we're kind of lucky at the moment. So online shopping here is still only a small percentage of how sales are actually generated. Those digital natives, I think accounts for 10, 15%. It'll probably grow to 20% over the next couple of years. So, they are coming to shopping centers to shop. They do have to go into a physical store, and that's still positive, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, our market still is quite physical, and our position, I guess, is to be innovative. We're kind of an adopter meets an innovator. We sort of invest in things that we know are going to work and sort of have a tried and true business case. And to sort of have a small service offering, but to not push it as far, I think, as some of our competition have in trying to play a role in, helping a retailer to actually do business.
Right. And actually, you bring up a good point, because one of the things that, myself working with so many different kinds of shopping centers globally is that in Australia, people still in mass are going to the shopping centers. They're still always packing them out. And like, I understand Amazon hasn't really made a break in Australia to any significant degree. I think it was only last year where, they even had an Amazon store that you could buy any product versus just like, I think it was a very minimum amount of SKUs that were available. Do you see something unique in Australia that, makes it so that shopping centers and those community hubs are still so popular?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the role of the shopping center has always sort of been, a place for Australians to go and be out, out in the community. I mean, we're kind of lucky also that most of the shopping centers in Australia kind of have, their own trade areas. So there's not a lot of overlap between major shopping centers and how they're set up. So I think the Amazon thing, I mean, they've come to Australia. Yes, they've set up an Australian store, but I think it's an interesting use case, I guess, in terms of globalization of a brand, because, they sort of entered, I think everyone was very scared that they were coming. They've set up, and it really, hasn't gone gangbusters. I'm not coming home in the day and seeing, a stack load of Amazon boxes in my foyer from people who are shopping online. Everyone's still going to the local Woolworths to get their groceries. And there's something, example that extends to something like Starbucks. So Starbucks came to Australia. Australia has a very big coffee culture in general. They kind of underestimated that coffee culture, didn't try and leverage that coffee culture, and, put whole stores all over the major cities, and they very quickly retreated and only have a few stores and key locations left, which is more, I would say, a brand presence for them in the market than, a huge way of making money. So I think Amazon, to that same degree, is we're not yet quite there yet as shoppers, as customers in Australia of online shopping. It's not the first thing you think of when you want to, buy some toilet paper or something, or some laundry detergent. You still think of Woolworths and Coles, which are our two major supermarkets. So it's, it'll change over time, but the behavior of doing that isn't there yet in the same way that it is, I think, in the US.
Yeah. And so I wonder how that makes the opportunity for you unique, in that, I think in North America, for example, you're going to have a lot of retail companies and real estate companies, mind you, thinking about how to compete with the person who is actually right now behaviorally jumping on Amazon to order their toilet paper, to order those goods where they don't want to go to the mall. You have in Australia the opportunity that people haven't built that behavior yet. I wonder then, potentially you're thinking about data a little bit different to your North American counterparts, because you have a different kind of opportunity there. It's less about, trying to bring people back to go get those goods. It's probably even a little bit less about the experiences. Maybe it's a little bit more about retention. It's like, okay, people haven't started gravitating away yet. Let's keep it that way. Let's just make sure that the value is maintained over time for them.
Yeah, and I think that's our focus, is get people through the door. So, I mean, the data sets that we collect, are to understand the trade area and, the demographic, the psychographic, whatever it is, but also, collecting information that understands them as people and their behavior, and then definitely matching that behavior up to what we collect through our websites and then what we get in store as people move around. So we kind of get that good online, offline mix of understanding, if someone looked at these 4 pages in the center on the website, and then they, went to our shopping center, they've connected to our Wi-Fi, did they potentially also walk through past those stores or into those stores? And that's kind of our role is, again, we provide that infrastructure and understanding that infrastructure and how the shopper sort of navigates and uses that, and how they're connecting to the brands that are in there. And then the counterpoint to that is what the retailers are doing within their own digital strategies and their microcosms that they've got within the businesses to understand their own shopper. So they're collecting the behavior information of what the stores are doing, what people are buying, and what their profiles are, and putting that all together then to understand, how the individual is actually purchasing from them. So I think those two worlds will come together. But again, for us, it's like the great infrastructure to trade off for the retailer to trade. And we've both got our own sort of digital strategies around, how to bring those two worlds together. I think the other underlying thing for us is, it's getting into that managed services or the business services question again, is, we're probably more focused on, looking at technology to help with shipping and logistics in a center, because we know that infrastructure provides the backbone for a retailer to trade off, rather than, trying to understand all the products they're selling to then collect that as data to then tell them what they should be selling. Because I think in the end, we're maybe chasing our tails a little bit, but they can definitely probably do it better than we can.
And I think, we've seen before, obviously, some particular businesses that have business models that essentially the future of retail real estate is only going to be when that data can be shared in one sort of ecosystem for the betterment of everybody. Are you bullish on the idea that that's true? Or are you a little bit more on the side that, actually, if you hone in exactly on the kind of assets you own, specifically on the kind of tenants that you're trying to attract, that might be, the right path forward in order to obviously increase revenues and increase sales in the future?
Yeah, and look, I think that space, when I joined the business 5 years ago, it was kind of one of the things that I wanted to push with the retailers, was, if we've got our data set, which understands, let's say that it's the common mall areas of our shopping centers, and then a retailer's, the in-store and what they're actually collecting is sort of a black box for us. How do we bridge the gap so we understand the full customer journey of how someone is, using those assets? And I think at that point in time, retail, especially in Australia, were in a rapid rate of innovating and sort of trying to understand the space, the data space, the digital space, technology, what technologies they needed, upgrading their point of sale systems, building data lakes, especially that old tenant-landlord relationship thing doesn't help things either, because sometimes we're seen as a necessary evil. I'd say today that's probably a little bit different. I think retailers have sort of caught up. We've caught up. We're probably both at a level of comfort where we can sort of start having those conversations a little bit more. And I think for a lot of retailers, us collecting that information and having, data sets that they don't is a large value proposition. I think a lot of retailers are then thinking, landlords and property businesses are thinking beyond the, let's share some data with you to help optimize, how you trade and how you operate your business into what's commercial opportunity. So that's either, what do you sell as data analytics or even data sets to help supplement what they're doing to trade better, with the customers we have, but also, what's outside of the industry. Should you be selling that data to loyalty businesses or, to a bank so that they can, bring that in and actually use that as well. So I think, there's a baseline around data sharing that makes, our infrastructure, how they trade better. And there's sort of a bigger picture around the value proposition of it to a retailer to sell or outside the market as well.
And the whole topic of data sharing actually nicely leads me into the next point that I sort of want to raise, which is data privacy. Yeah, I'm wondering how your business looks at PII and making sure that when you are collecting information about the shoppers who are coming in, online, offline usage and behaviors, protecting that and making sure that it's never used for any purposes that isn't upfront and acknowledged by, the person you're collecting data from.
Yeah, I mean, we take the PII information very seriously on multiple levels. I mean, I think for us and, our privacy policies, our terms, we are sort of in that stage where we're just collecting it to understand the customer. We're not sharing it with third parties. We're not trying to sell it to anybody. So for us, it's really to understand our assets, optimize our assets and make them better.
Yeah. And typically when you're looking for any sort of location service to do things like push notifications, understand where users are, there is always the hesitation that, those big companies who are providing that service are using that data in more ways than you can even anticipate. I wonder how much that trend is permeating where, these big companies are very forthright in that we want to collect all the data possible and we're going to do with it whatever we want, versus startups who might be able to offer a similar feature set and really the only difference is privacy. I wonder how much privacy, weighs into potentially your decisions about which vendors to work with and which ones not to work with.
Yeah, I mean, for me, we would definitely only look at companies where the data sets that we're collecting through the technologies or platforms they're providing are kind of owned by us. They're not on-sold to anybody else, and that we're just using them for the purposes of what we need to use them for, which is to get people through the doors of a shopping center. It's not only the legal side, but the security side. So we have, quite a lot of due diligence around if data is being collected by a certain third party, how safe and secure is that on behalf of the consumer or the retailer? Because there is also, we could be signing up to a business that isn't on selling it to anybody else, but they might have such terrible security controls of their technology that it's going to get hacked and stolen anyway. So that's kind of that, what are the terms saying around the use of data? But then really, how good are you as a technology company in terms of keeping it safe and secure on our behalf?
So one of the biggest trends that we're seeing right now in the industry is actually a little bit of a pivot. It's not the data that you're collecting that is valuable to others, external to you. It's actually the data you have that you own. And so it's actually where your tenants are inside of an indoor building. So, there's been articles in the Wall Street Journal. I think there was one in the New York Times a couple of months ago where it was essentially saying that the world hasn't really given enough credit or value to where things are in the world. So it gave this reference point, I think it was something around Yelp, and how a certain business was, pinned in a location, and that location didn't exist, but it was actually generating advertising for that brand who was actually in a different location. But because they nefariously put that pin in the wrong location because they knew a lot of people would be searching in that area. They actually, found an artificial way of driving demand, and that was all based on location. So what we're seeing right now is on the indoors, that just even gets much more complicated because no one other than the landlord really knows on any given day what's going on underneath that roof. Who are the tenants that are there? Where are they located? And in the world now where everything is geo-fenced, understanding the data of where things are is becoming actually something people are willing to pay for. Big companies are willing to pay for that. They don't care about your customer data. They have that. They have their own customer data. They just want you to tell them, where are those stores? Because if someone's walking in there, I want to push them a notification because I know they're standing in front of Aritzia. And you can guarantee me there's an Aritzia store there. If you can give me that confidence, I'll pay you, and then I can do my own marketing campaigns on my end. So, long tangent, but are you seeing in the industry as it evolves that more and more people are actually much more interested in, the map? Like, where are things underneath that roof and how can I use it for my own marketing purposes?
Yeah, yes, most definitely. I always find it ironic when, I would maybe not name them, but one of the large companies that does maps that we all use on a daily basis keeps telling me they want to map out our entire shopping center, and that we have to then maintain those maps, every few months to give them the relevant retailers and what the spaces are, because I understand the value of that to them as a business, because once you let them through the doors, they're inside, and you're not really getting rid of them unless you stop updating things, I guess, over time. So yeah, location is definitely extremely important. Location where the stores are, where a shopper is as well, where they live, location, I guess, sort of, is a defining factor of a point in time. So you can have, in a shopping center, the heat maps, which do aggregate and unidentified flows, but knowing exactly where someone was and did they actually, convert to a brand, what their favorite brands are, is quite important.
Do you feel like the industry is really taking advantage of this yet? Because, that big name that we won't mention, most people are just doing that for free because it's more exposure. But do you think the conversation is coming up where actually, hey, maybe this is more beneficial to them than they are to us? So maybe they should be paying for these things that we're actually just giving to them for free.
Yeah, and I think that large business that shall not be named, we rely on them for a whole lot of other things, right? So they do help the saliency of the asset, but I think that there's some IP in that for us in terms of what the built environment is and where things are. So yeah, it is actually highly desirable to third parties.
Yeah, and not to bully that one, because to be honest, I can think of another 6 big company names who are asking for the exact same thing. Like, everyone wants that data, and they're actually doing less of a service to real estate than the big guy is. So I think it's a very interesting trend because that's something that's always just been part and parcel of real estate retail, that it's never been seen as something that is highly desirable, because that level of granularity and accuracy when it comes to a user's location indoors, then what's happening indoors is also becoming, incredibly valuable based on where things are. So yeah, I think it is still something that is in its early sort of infancy, but it is becoming a topic that, we're seeing some large real estate companies say, wait a second, you guys really, really want this, and actually thinking about it, you're going to make a lot of money off this if I give it to you. Okay, I need some of the cut here, and maybe it's not even just a flat fee. Maybe, I'm getting, every time you're putting an ad, a geofence inside of my property, maybe I should take a percentage of that.
Yeah, yes, from definitely a direct revenue standpoint. I think the thing that I learned over the last 5 years working in the industry is, we often overlook or forget about, I guess, the intangible asset value of what we actually build through data and technology and applications, and putting in systems and how they track people, that sort of stuff. Because for me, everything that we do, first and foremost, is optimizing, I guess, the infrastructure and our shopping centers so that retailers and customers can trade. But I also put it through that lens of, if we were to sell the business or sell an asset, let's say, what could we actually pass along to the new buyer, and what's the margin on that to supplement the physical asset sale? So, we're selling a building, but if we're also selling a whole lot of data sets we've collected over the last 5 years, there's a, say it's $1 billion asset, we're not going to make an extra $1 billion, but there's definitely a little bit more margin to be made in terms of having collected that information and the desirability of somebody else. I think, the whole space is about what is that value to somebody else. What's the value to us as a business, but what's it worth to somebody else? And that's really how you can value the space as an asset, I guess, to sell. So we've done a lot of work around, we've invested in building our platform, we're collecting data sets, and we've had, intellectual property lawyers actually look at it and say, yeah, you may have spent X on it over the number of years, the operating cost of maintaining it is this, but actually if you were to take it to market and sell it, it would be worth, 4 times as much as what you've actually invested to somebody else.
And I mean, maybe you agree with me that maybe not in the next 10 years, maybe not in the next 30 years, but one day those intangibles may even, overtake the tangibles in terms of value when you're selling off a property. That what you've been able to collect over the last 30 years as it relates to customers and their behaviors and how people navigate a physical space when, you're putting something on the market and you want to sell it off. One day, hopefully, at least I'm predicting that those intangibles would actually speak to most of the value, and it would be less on the actual real estate and the land that you're buying.
Yeah, I'd probably put a 10, 20-year horizon on that. I mean, in the end, if you're going to sell an office tower, it's still, going to be a few $1 billion sale. But yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is going to factor more and more into, I guess, the conversation around the physical asset and its value. So yeah, literally, again, having this conversation this week is, as we look at different assets that we want to own, let us go and actually go to the asset and do a bit of a valuation on what technology set they are or what kind of data sets they own and what we can get across, because that all factors then into the long-term value of the asset beyond just the physical presence and how many people walk through the door. So I think it's definitely an emerging conversation. It's one that's always been in the back of my mind because I go, it's digital. Who are the big digital businesses? And if we're going to play in that space, what we need to do needs to be good for our business, but it's also what's the value of it if you put it in a market context. So
maybe going to the roots of why shopping centers existed in the first place, and it was because no one really had somewhere to hang out together. Like, they were built as community hubs. Hey, where do you meet your friends? Like, they could go to your house, but if you want to go into the public, where do you go? You go to the shopping center. So I think potentially that root of why shopping centers existed in the first place is maybe what should be played to as the advantage going forward. Because I think there are too many companies, like, it's all got to be about digital, online stores, online shopping. But, maybe actually just focusing on the fundamentals. Hey, we're a community hub. This is where people hang out together. If they do a little bit of shopping, great. But, that's why shopping centers existed in the first place.
Yeah, and it's that lost side of what we're supposed to be good at as businesses, right? Great built form, great retailers, and then a place to hang out. So I mean, we have to go into a data space. We have to have technology. We have to have websites and things like that. But we don't need to have them to compete with Google or Amazon or eBay or Facebook, because it's just a race to the bottom, right?
So look, thank you so much for taking the time today and actually speaking with me. I mean, obviously you're incredibly intelligent on this topic, and that's why we really wanted you to have the opportunity to answer some of these questions. It's an absolute pleasure, Aaron, and thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.